Hi, I'm President Deniz A. Erdal. Thank you for joining us for the 6th episode of the Fireside Cast. Today I'm joined in the studio by Cabinet Member Jon Orth. Thanks for joining the program, John.
Thanks for having me, Dennis. It's great to be on the show.
So I would like to start the program by talking a little bit about the proposal for the class constitution and why I believe it's necessary. I'd like to start by reading the preamble of this class constitution. It's a bit like the preamble of the U.S. Constitution, with some little differences. So it goes like this. We, the students, in order to form a functioning government, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common good, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of education to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the class government of the class of 2021.
Yeah, you're definitely right. It is very modeled after our own, but a lot of the same things do apply, which is nice.
Indeed, and of course, one of the main reasons why I proposed this Constitution is because previously our class government didn't have a document that helped us conduct our meetings. There were no outlines for the class government. There was the school handbook, but that doesn't really talk a lot about how the class government should be run.
It is, I know we talked about it a little bit, but it gives some vague guidelines, but it doesn't really give any direct instructions like this would.
Yes. So I would like to start by I'd like to continue by reading Article 1, which is about the government meetings. So, the class government of the class of 2021 shall have a meeting at least once every week. A quorum of one class officer and the supervisor, or a quorum of 3 class officers must be established to conduct the meeting. The supervisor shall retain the right to convene the class government at his pleasure. The class government itself may choose to reconvene at any time by a majority vote. The supervisor shall retain the power to discipline class officers who fail to show up to meetings. And for students who don't know, the supervisor for this year is Mr. Wagner, who's a language arts teacher. So what do you think about the first article?
I think it's good. One thing I do like is the ability to have a quorum with just one officer and the supervisor. So if others don't show up, you can still conduct meetings. Although not the most efficient, you can still have stuff be done. And also it doesn't give too much power towards any one officer. It's more towards the supervisor has this,
of course,
this
because the
majority
supervisor still has to be
should.
there with that one officer, so it sort of incorporates some checks and balances. Or you could have 3 class officers, but that's a majority, and so I don't think that would be unbalanced necessarily. Let's continue with Article 3. This is about conducting voting within the class government. So, all votes shall be conducted in the presence of the supervisor, who shall tally the votes. In the event of a tie, the supervisor shall cast the tie-breaking vote. After the passing of a resolution, the approval of the supervisor is required for the resolution to be adopted. The supervisor shall retain absolute veto power. The class officers who fail to maintain a 50% attendance average shall be ineligible to vote.
Interesting.
And so this does give the supervisor quite a lot of power, but I don't think the supervisor would be one to take advantage of this. And of course, we are a student government, and so there will be some things that the teachers will find absolutely unacceptable. And also the 50% attendance average does sort of go along with the line in Article 1 where it states the supervisor shall retain the power to discipline class officers who fail to show up to meetings.
And I think we should address that, like, the part about the 50% attendance is without just reasoning, you know.
Without just
Yeah.
reasoning, of course, like just simply not showing up without giving any sort of excuse or so.
Yeah, which
to speak.
I think is understandable.
It does also encourage attendance in the government. It encourages the class officers to participate
Yeah.
in the government meetings, and perhaps the class government could actually get some stuff done.
Yeah, which, you know, I think a lot of people want us to do things. They always, we get a lot of questions about what have we done, what are we trying to do. So the more people we have at meetings, the easier it is to get stuff through.
Now, I know as a part of the cabinet, you and I have done a lot of work, especially with the advertisements and during the campaign
Yeah.
last year, and even the Fireside cast, because that's produced by the cabinet. But the class officers haven't, as the class officers, we haven't really done much this year. People come up to me and ask, what do you do as the class officers? And really, there isn't much I can say to them other than the winter dance. And I don't want it to be that way.
Yeah.
I want to be able to say that as the class officers, we do stuff. We are a functioning government. That is what I want this class government to be.
Yeah, I completely agree. You know, because I don't know, we worked hard for this position, and it's kind of unfortunate that we don't really get as much power as you may be led to believe. Like you're right. We only get really opinions on the winter dance. And that's about it. But we want to do more.
Indeed, of course.
We want to be a government.
So let's move on to Article 4. So after the adoption of a resolution, 4 copies of a resolution shall be made. The copies shall be sent to the principal, the assistant principal, and the school secretary. The final copy shall be kept by the supervisor. The resolution shall be made public on Schoology, and any student shall be able to view the resolutions. So this sort of ties into one of my campaign promises of having an open government that's sort of open, not secret, so that people can see what's going on. We want transparency.
And I think another thing that goes along with that is it kind of shows that we are trying to do things, you know, that we're trying to get things passed, that we're not just kind of not doing anything. So that's another good thing that comes along with that, transparency.
Yes. And so let's move on to Article 5. This is regarding proxy officials. So the class officers shall designate a proxy official for every position by majority vote, who shall become an acting class officer in the event that the class officer for whom the proxy was selected is unable to fulfill his or her duties. In the event that a class officer is absent, the proxy officials for that officer shall receive all rights and privileges that class officers enjoy. That includes the right to participate in the debate, the right to vote on resolutions, etc., for the duration in which the class officer is absent. Proxy officials shall be able to vote if the officer for whom they are the proxy for becomes ineligible to vote, except in cases of impeachment, which is outlined in Article 6. Proxy officials shall serve until the next general election. We have a general election every year in May. A class officer may not become a proxy official. So, for example, I can't be designated as a proxy official for the vice president. It would have to be a student in the class of 2021, and that's also stated in the Constitution. So, what's your take, John, on Article 5?
Well, one thing I like is it kind of refers back to, like earlier in the Constitution where I said the more people we can have to attend debates and make resolutions, the more stuff we can get done. And this allows us to, even if class officers aren't able to attend, we can still have people attend for them, and we can still operate.
And of course, these people are selected by the class officers, so they
Yes,
would be a representative of the people, because the people gave these class officers a mandate, including myself. And so we have the will of the people behind us.
And one thing I do like you said is whether the officers can determine whether the proxy official can vote, and I think that's a good thing, because one thing I worry about with this is, you know, the officers are elected by people, and then it's a little. I think something we could add is like the proxy official should be approved through the cabinet or another group of people, because, you know, similar to our government, like our national government is designated officials are then approved. So this I would think that would also help in having an officer designate someone who isn't necessarily a good candidate for a proxy official.
But the cabinet, I don't think it would be acceptable to have the cabinet vote on this, as the cabinet is completely independent of the school, not to create any confusion. The cabinet members are not elected officials.
Oh yeah, I know.
Cabinet members are people who work specifically for me as the president, as a part of my cabinet. Now, the other class officers are elected by the people, so there's a big difference there. But I do see your point. So, for example, perhaps the supervisor has to sign off
that's what I was
on the
thinking,
appointment
like
or something like that, or perhaps a referendum of the people. So let's talk a little bit about Article 7, which talks about the extent of powers. It's very similar to the 10th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. It says, "The powers not delegated to the supervisor by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the class officers, are reserved to the class officers respectively, or to the students." Now, this article is to prevent tyranny by the supervisor. So the students still, under this Constitution, the powers not given to the supervisor would be retained by us, the people. And so it would prevent tyranny by the teachers, I believe. However, of course, they do still have a lot of veto power, for example, as outlined in Article 1, and a lot of power. And so I think this does, however, still retain some small amount of power to us, the students.
Which, the power, or the teachers will always have more power, and I think that's okay. I mean, they're not going to abuse their power, as we mentioned, but I think this article is less taking power away from teachers and more giving more power to students and the officers. So.
And then, so Article 8 talks about the amending of the Constitution. So amendments may be added to the Constitution by unanimous vote of the class officers and by the approval of the supervisor. So it's not incredibly easy to amend it, but it's not terribly hard either.
We have a government of 4 students, so it wouldn't be terribly hard.
Exactly. So that's the Constitution. What's your take on it?
Oh well, I know we talked about this before we went in further, but it kind of lays a set of ground rules and things to follow that isn't necessarily specified within the student handbook. There's a few things that the student handbook specifies that we are still going by, especially in articles of impeachment. But this defines power a lot more and establishes a system for which our government can run easily. So
and that's the idea.
That's the whole purpose of the Constitution.
So to change gears a little bit, I know that recently the musical for this year was changed from Seussical the musical to Mamma Mia. And you've worked previously as part of the stage crew at the various musicals at Hastings and for Anything Goes last year. Can you tell us a little bit about why this change was made?
I think it could be a few different things, but I think the main one is Seussical, right from like since it went on Broadway, it wasn't very well received. A lot of people really disliked it, and it didn't last very long on Broadway. And I think it's a very difficult show to pull off. And I mean, it's like this very cartoony and this very, I don't know, it's this colorful show, but I know like one of my biggest worries when it was first announced is that it would be kind of cheesy and corny, and so it's understandable why they would change it.
So, can you tell us a little bit about the replacement show, Mamma Mia? I know Mamma Mia is an ABBA song. Is there any relation?
Yeah, I don't know a whole lot about the show, but I know it's all ABBA songs that were previously written, and they had to change, a few lyrics to make it kind of work together, but it is all previously written in the ABBA songs, so that definitely has a big thing to do with it, if that answers your question.
All right, so the entire show then is centered around ABBA music then?
Yeah, it's all based on it, and I know it has some more story behind it, but it's basically these songs, put together in a show.
Well, thank you for joining the conversation, Jon.
It was a pleasure.
Major funding for the Fireside cast has been provided by Serpent Cinematography,
Thunderstruck Studios,
TV Productions,
the Combat Robot Care Foundation, empowering robotics engineering since 2016.
and from contributions from listeners like you. Thank you. If you'd like to sponsor an episode and have your name mentioned in the end slate, please contact a cabinet member for further information.